The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. As Ethan stood in front of his childhood home, his heart pounding in his chest, he had been dreading this moment for weeks, but he knew he couldn't put it off any longer. He took a deep breath, straightened the hem of his dress, a soft, flowing fabric that still felt foreign against his skin, and stepped through the front door. The familiar scent of his mother's cooking filled the air, but it didn't bring the comfort it once did. His parents were in the living room, his father reading the newspaper and his mother knitting in her favorite armchair. They both looked up as he entered, and the room seemed to freeze. "Ethan?" his mother said, her voice trembling as she took in his appearance. Her eyes widened at the sight of the long hair, the delicate makeup, the way he carried himself now, no longer the son they had raised, but someone entirely new. What's going on?" Ethan swallowed hard, his palms slick with sweat. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something." His voice was softer now, more melodic than it had been before. He'd been practicing for months, trying to sound more like the woman he'd always felt he was meant to be. His father lowered the newspaper slowly, his expression unreadable. "What is it, son?" The word son cut through him like a knife. He clenched his fists, trying to steady himself. "I'm not your son anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I've changed. I'm a woman now." His mother's hand flew to her mouth, muffling a gasp. His father's face darkened, his jaw tightening as he processed the words. There was silence, thick and suffocating, until his father finally spoke. "Is this some kind of joke?" His voice was low, dangerous, because if it is, it's not funny. Ethan shook his head, his heart aching at the disbelief in his father's voice. "It's not a joke. This is who I am. I've always felt this way, but I was too scared to say anything. I didn't want to disappoint you." "Disappoint us?" His father's voice rose, and Ethan flinched. "You think this isn't a disappointment? We raised you to be a man, not whatever this is." He gestured wildly at Ethan's appearance, his face contorted with anger. His mother was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she stared at him. "Ethan, why? Why would you do this to yourself? To us?" "It's not something I'm doing to you," Ethan said, his voice pleading. "This is about me, about who I really am. I couldn't keep living a lie. I've started hormone therapy, and I've changed my name. I go by Emma now." "Emma," his father spat the name like it was poison. "That's not who you are. You're our son, our son." The words stung, but Ethan refused to back down. "I'm still the same person inside. I'm still your child. I need you to see me for who I really am." His father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're not my child. Not anymore." His voice was cold, final. "If you're going to live like this, then you're not welcome in this house." Ethan's heart shattered, his chest tightening as if he'd been punched. He looked to his mother, desperate for some kind of support, but she shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Emma, I don't understand," she whispered. "Why couldn't you just be happy with who you were?" "Because it wasn't me," Emma said, her voice breaking. "I've never been happy pretending to be someone I'm not. I thought you'd understand." His father strode to the door and yanked it open, the cool evening air rushing in. "You have 10 minutes to pack your things and leave." His voice was like iron, leaving no room for argument. "And don't come back until you've gotten rid of this nonsense." Emma stared at him, her vision blurred with tears. "Dad, please. I'm still your child. I'm still." "Out!" his father roared, and Emma jumped, her heart pounding. She turned to her mother one last time, but the older woman just looked away, her sobs filling the silence. With a trembling hand, Emma picked up her purse and headed for the stairs. She moved mechanically, her mind numb as she packed her belongings into a suitcase. Her hand shook as she zipped it shut, the sound echoing in the empty room. She paused in the doorway of her childhood bedroom, taking one last look at the posters on the walls, the desk where she'd spent hours studying, the bed where she'd lain awake at night. dreaming of a life where she could be herself. She closed the door softly behind her, the finality of it hitting her like a gut punch. Her parents were still in the living room when she came downstairs, their faces stony and unyielding. She hesitated at the door, clutching her suitcase like a lifeline. "I love you both," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her father turned away, but her mother's eyes met hers for a brief moment, filled with pain and confusion. "Emma," she started, but her husband's sharp look silenced her. Emma stepped outside, the cool light air wrapping around her like a shroud. She walked down the driveway, her heels clicking against the pavement, and didn't look back. The sound of the door slamming behind her echoed in her ears, a harsh reminder that the life she'd known was gone. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay here. Her mind raced as she walked, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. She thought about her college friend, the one person who had always accepted her for who she was, the reason she'd had the courage to finally be herself. She pulled out her phone and dialed his number, her hands trembling. He picked up on the second ring. "Emma? Hey, what's up?" She took a shaky breath, trying to steady her voice. "Hey, Jake, I need a favor." "Sure, what's going on?" She hesitated, tears welling up again. Can I stay with you? Just for a little while?" There was a pause, and then Jake's voice was soft, concerned. "Of course, are you okay?" She swallowed hard, the words catching in her throat. "I'll tell you when I get there." "All right, just let me know when you're close, and I'll come meet you." "Thanks, Jake." She hung up, clutching the phone to her chest as she walked toward the bus stop. The night was quiet, the streets empty, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely alone. But she also felt free. Emma stepped off the bus, her luggage dragging behind her like an anchor. The weight of it, both physical and emotional, pulled at her shoulders as she scanned the dimly lit street. Jake had promised to meet her here, but in the meantime, the cold night air nipped at her exposed skin, sending a shiver down her spine. She adjusted the strap of her bag, the fabric of her dress clinging to her thighs as she shifted uncomfortably. The sound of footsteps approaching made her heart leap, but when she turned, it wasn't Jake standing there, it was someone else entirely. "Emma?" came a familiar voice, soft and hesitant. Emma froze, her chest tightened as she recognized the figure stepping into the dim glow of the streetlight. Lila. Her ex-girlfriend stood before her, as beautiful as ever, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders in loose waves. She wore a fitted leather jacket and jeans that hugged her curves, her piercing green eyes scanning Emma with a mix of surprise and concern. "Lila," Emma breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Lila hesitated, her hands stuffed into the pockets of her jacket. "I heard about everything from Jake." Emma's stomach dropped. Of course, Jake and Lila had always been close, even after their breakup. It made sense he'd reach out to her, but why now? Why tonight? "I just wanted to. I don't know, check on you," Lila continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Jake said you were staying with him, but," she trailed off, her gaze flickering to the suitcase at Emma's feet. "You look like you could use a friend." Emma shook her head, her throat tightening. "I'm fine, really. Jake's coming to pick me up." Lila took a step closer, her expression softening. "Emma, come on, you don't have to pretend with me. I know things must be hard for you right now." Emma's resolve wavered. The kindness in Lila's voice, something she hadn't heard in so long, threatened to break her. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as she fought to keep her composure. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "We haven't talked in months, Lila. Not since everything." Lila flinched, hurt flashing across her face. "Because I still care about you, Emma. Despite everything that happened between us, I never stopped caring." Emma blinked, surprised by the raw honesty in Lila's words. She opened her mouth to respond, but the sound of a car pulling up interrupted her thoughts. Both women turned to see Jake's familiar sedan rolling to a stop along the curb. "Hey," Jake called as he stepped out of the car, his easygoing smile faltering as he noticed Lila. What's going on here? Lila crossed her arms, her posture defensive. Just checking in on Emma. Thought she might need some support. Jake raised an eyebrow, glancing from Lila to Emma. Well, I've got it covered. Thanks. Emma felt a pang of guilt as tension crackled between the two. She stepped forward, holding up a hand. It's fine, Jake. Lila was just leaving. But Lila didn't move. Instead, she took another step toward Emma, her expression pleading. Look, I know things between us are complicated, but I have a spare room. If you need somewhere to stay, just let me help you. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She glanced at Jake, who was frowning deeply, clearly uncomfortable with the offer. But the thought of staying with Lila, somewhere familiar, somewhere safe, was unexpectedly tempting. Emma started, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to refuse, to stick with the plan and go with Jake. But another part of her, a part she couldn't quite ignore, wanted to say yes, to give herself a chance to reconnect with someone who once meant so much to her. Jake cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Emma, we should get going. It's late. Lila's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, scribbling something on it before handing it to Emma. Here, she said softly, if you change your mind. Emma stared at the slip of paper, her fingers brushing against Lila's as she took it. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade away. All the history between them, all the pain and regret, hung heavy in the air. Thanks, Emma whispered, tucking the paper into her pocket. Lila nodded, her lips curving into a faint, sad smile. Take care of yourself, Emma. As Lila turned and walked away, Emma felt a lump forming in her throat. She watched until Lila disappeared into the shadows, leaving her alone with Jake. Ready? Jake asked, his voice gentle but firm. Emma nodded, though her thoughts were elsewhere. She climbed into the passenger seat, her mind swirling with questions and possibilities. What would happen if she stayed with Lila? Could they really move past everything that had happened between them? You okay? Jake asked as he started the car, his tone laced with concern. Emma forced a smile, nodding again. Yeah, just tired. But the truth was, she wasn't sure how she felt. As Jake drove through the quiet streets, Emma's fingers brushed against the slip of paper in her pocket, her heart pounding in her chest. The choice felt impossible: stay with Jake, the one person who had always been there for her, or take a risk and reach out to Lila, someone who had once been her everything. What should I do?